Our last presenter this morning is Dr. Pamela Blais. Many of you know her as well. She's principal of Metropole Consultants, author of Perverse Cities, which I'm sure this audience has read through very thoroughly. So Pamela, it's all yours.
Good morning, everybody. Well, I hear some themes emerging. One of them, which is the first theme I think everybody's talking about, is it's early days with respect to the Places to Grow plan. And to quote the Carpenters, we've only just begun. But I think this is a problem with planning. Planning is slow. And in the 7 years since we've adopted Places to Grow, and while it's been working its way through the system and lower tier plans coming into conformity, we've added 400,000 new residents to auto-dependent suburbs in the Toronto CMA alone. And that's based on some work that David Gordon has done actually for municipalities across Canada. So that by 2011, we have 4 million residents in the CMA alone living in auto-dependent suburbs. So in my view, we don't really have the luxury of time in this region that is growing so very quickly. And because of the pace of growth and the scale of the region, this is really a pressing matter. And that we really have to turn it around very quickly, because obviously once subdivisions are built, it's very difficult to go back and change them. So just getting to some of Paul's questions, which were really, what's our take on what's been happening since 2006, and what would we like to see changed? One of the things that I think is important is to note that obviously in the city of Toronto there has been a lot of change, and we all are well aware of the condo boom in downtown Toronto and along the subway lines. And that is, though, where the lion's share of intensification has been taking place. Very few other areas outside of the city of Toronto have shown intensification. Maybe a little bit in Mississauga, maybe a little bit in Markham, for example, or possibly Vaughan, but really about 3/4 of all of the apartments that have been built 2006 to 2010 have been in the city of Toronto alone. So my concern is outside of the city of Toronto that we're really not seeing change. And I guess what seems to be the consensus is, well, that's not surprising, because really the plan hasn't bit yet, because it's still working its way through the system. The performance indicators that the province have released, I think it's great that they're following up and doing some monitoring on the plan and whether the objectives are being achieved. I think the numbers that are, is that better? Better? The numbers that have been presented so far in that Places to Grow indicators are really overstating the level of intensification, well, everywhere except for the city of Toronto, where it's at 100%. Because of the methodology, and again, because it's early on and they're preliminary, a lot of those units that are being counted as intensification are essentially lagging greenfields development. So they're very close to the built boundary, and they're basically unfinished subdivisions and other slightly lagging greenfield sites. So those intensification rate numbers are going to be falling. And in fact, even between 2006 and 2010, the data that's been presented, the numbers dropped dramatically in those 4 years. And that will continue to happen until we see an actual shift in development patterns, which we haven't seen yet, again, particularly outside the city of Toronto. And in my view, we can't really continue to build this auto-dependent, expensive-to-service region, and given its ever-massive scale, will become more increasingly difficult to serve cost-effectively with transit, which is our intention in the companion piece with the big move. So where do we need to focus? Again, I think echoing the other panelists, really I think the focus has to be on implementation. It's not so much the plan itself, it's about how do we get the plan implemented so we actually see substantial and significant change on the ground. And in my view, it can't be done by planning alone. So I have 3 suggestions. The first one is with respect to planning, and I think it gets to the issue of supply and land supply, which has also been brought up. And I think we really need to level the playing field between new development on greenfield sites and new development on already urbanized lands from a planning perspective. Most municipalities, again, outside the City of Toronto, are essentially big machines for turning out greenfield development opportunities. Their planning departments are set up to do that. That's what they do. Not so with respect to reurbanization. With reurbanization, the process is reactive, it's slow, it's case by case, it's expensive, you end up at the board, and therefore it's discouraged. So I think we really need to figure out ways to move forward to upfront, proactive, comprehensive, area-based planning in key locations for reurbanization within all municipalities. So maybe that's in the inner suburbs, for example, as Leith has described, but it has to include permissive zoning so that development in those strategic areas across the Greater Golden Horseshoe is building permit ready. And they've done this in other places. New York City, for example, the city's gone in proactively rezoned 130 different areas. So the province, for example, in the same way as is often required for greenfields, could require a minimum, say, 10-year supply of building permit-ready sites on already urbanized lands to make sure that those development opportunities are ready and they're attractive for developers and not penalized and overly costly because of the planning process. So that's the first piece. The second piece is about price signals and the financial factors, which also I think Leith was mentioning. Here, one of the issues, of course, is that the public sector role, and I'm focusing here on things that the public sector can do, they essentially set prices for things like development charges, user fees, property tax was also mentioned, as well as provincial tax incentives. And these prices affect the market. These public sector prices or public sector policies essentially affect the market prices of land, homes, businesses, and these in turn shape our development patterns. They affect the demand and supply factors for land and building. The unfortunate thing is at the moment, the effect of these policies on our development patterns and our decision making isn't really considered when we're developing those policies. And unfortunately, they overwhelmingly have the effect of providing incentives for the inefficient, auto-dependent development patterns that we're seeing and financial disincentives for the compact and transit-supportive kinds of development that Places to Grow plan suggests is what we want. So I think we really need to bring pricing into the equation, hence my little circle, my little donut, including pricing, and recognize that pricing is a planning tool. You know, as planners, we tend to think, well, that's got nothing to do with us, but it does have important implications for development patterns. And if we brought it into our toolbox, then it could have very positive outcomes. And we really need to make sure that those public sector prices are aligned with our Places to Grow objective, which they are not at the moment. And in that regard, the Development Charges Act review is currently underway. That is a really important opportunity to make sure that development charges are brought on side and that they are lining up with our Places to Grow objectives. The final piece is with respect to investment. This has also been mentioned today with respect to transit. I think we're still not really doing a good job of ensuring that our investments are coordinated and that different public investments don't actively undermine each other. And one example here, not only is it about aligning Big Move with the growth plan, which Marcy has mentioned, but we really need to look, for example, at our investment in roads versus transit. We need to look at these two things together and across the region as a whole. That investment is kind of fragmented now because a lot of it is undertaken by individual municipalities. So we need to make sure it all adds up to the kind of vision that we want, so we're not wasting resources in making those investments. We have been over-investing in roads, and that's how we've supported the auto-dependent pattern that we have. That would preclude cost-effective transit. On the provincial side, there has been a shift in recent years to more money for transit, and that's great, but the spending on roads continues to increase as well. And on the municipal side, still a lot of spending on roads, about $500 million a year across the province from DCs alone. And again, that's fragmented, so nobody really knows, where that's going or how that adds up and factors into our attainment of the Places to Grow vision. Outside the City of Toronto, DCs are going at about 8 times as much for roads versus transit. That is the money that's raised through development charges, 8 times as much spent on roads versus transit. So I guess to sum up, we need to make a shift in order to shift the development pattern, we also have to shift other things. We need to shift the investment pattern, and we need to shift the incentive framework for different kinds of development. And what I've been arguing is, with respect to the incentive framework, we have to make that neutral. It's not neutral at the moment. It's kind of fraught with different kinds of distortions which actually undermine our places to grow objective. So planning is necessary, but not sufficient. It's one piece of an integrated approach that has to really include pricing, spending, and planning. Thank you.